They thought that there is much more important thing than democracy. And of course we know now that they failed. You don't have a free opinion there. Democracy is the only system in the world that will hold. Hi, here is Markku Wilenius, Cuba, Havana. Behind me, there is a Capitolio, which is a bit like a replica from Washington Capitol building. It was built in 1920s here in Cuba for the building where parliamentarians can meet. And today here in Cuba, yes, the parliament convenes in this very building. We remember well what happened 2 years plus ago in the US when there were people that invaded there in that very holy building. They thought that there is much more important thing than democracy, namely to have their candidate in power at any price. And of course we know now that they failed. But what really happened was that they showed the possibility that democracy is sometimes very fragile. It is fragile because the idea of the democracy is that everybody supports that the people of the country sort of pays allegiance to the idea of the democracy. Of course, in today's world, a very naive concept. If this fails at times in America, it fails also elsewhere. And why is that? I think the real reason is that there are lots of people increasingly, in spite of all the wealth creation of the world, that are becoming more desperate because somehow they feel that they are left out. What they want to do is that they want to be a partisan for something else. They want to kind of have their rights acknowledged, whatever they think their rights are. Here in Cuba, parliamentarians are convening there, but all people know here that the ultimate power is not with them, it's in the leadership. It's in the president and particularly the party leader. But for the sake of showing that this is a people's republic, they are the convening and they are making laws and so forth. Now, what is the future if this type of democratic models become hollow and they don't really have the content? I think the answer lies in the conclusion, which is quite obvious. And it is that for democracy really to become and stay as a norm, it has to be nurtured. So what is the best way to nurture democracy? As we are mundane human beings, I think one of the key ingredients is that we have the economy that distributes wealth more or less equally. This, however, does not happen in many parts of the world. Even in those countries, like Nordic countries, for instance, that have a quite equal structure of its people. They even have sometimes problems to defend the democracy, which is all about having diverse opinions and arriving at the conclusions that the majority holds. There always are these efforts to actually destroy that democracy and build something else, because you want to cut the corner short, so to say, if you are the leader, if you are the one that kind of thinks that he or she knows the best. What is the road to the future of this country? And that moment, the future itself comes very coercive. It comes as something that is not reinvented by the people of that country, but it actually becomes something that is pushed top down, whether you like it or not. In that type of a situation, we then often fail to recognize that, well, the democracy that there was once, it's gone. And this can happen in any country, I would say. Look at, for instance, what has happened with Hungary. Hungary was a very democratic, open country until Viktor Orban came. And he started to inch that country towards the autocracy, which is what it is today. You don't have a free opinion there. You have a one voice which is overwhelming over the others. In my measure of whether it's a democracy or not, it's not a real democracy. It's a very hollow democracy, if anything. But for this world, when we look at the road to the future, more than anything else, we need the democracy. And the democracy that has equitable, fair, collaborative economy, democracy that holds social equity in a high regard, and democracy that allows very diverse opinions of the people and then suggest something out of that noise. All of these three conditions have to be met in a true democracy. And of course, in our representative democracy model that we mostly have in this world, it means that there are some representatives, people that have been chosen to present the people at large. And that was invented at the time when the French Revolution broke out somewhere 200 plus years ago, and when the industrial society started to slowly to emerge. That came because it was pretty obvious that for that new world we need a new model of leadership and governance. Here in Cuba we see that if there is a true democracy, then it gives the opportunity for people, and you allow that to happen. You allow people to freely express themselves and to do whatever they think that is important. I mean, within the constraints of the law and order, the rule of law. But if you don't have that, if you don't have that real right to be a master of your own destiny in those perspectives, then something else occurs. I believe very strongly that the democracy is the only system in the world that will hold, because up until today there is nothing better. Nobody has come up with anything better. We can of course discuss what type of the democracy. Is it the representative democracy, which sometimes feel a bit old-fashioned, or is it more like a direct democracy where people participate directly to all these governance structures? It's a bit hard to organize, but it's possible, like in Switzerland for instance, which is highly decentralized form of democracy, so that each of the cantons, each of the states within these federal states have practically their own laws, their own systems, and on the other hand they agree to have things in common. When we think about those different forms of democracy, I think then we are on the right path. But if you think about it, there is truly an alternative to that, no, I don't think so. Because if there is any other form, it looks very much to me that they don't have a license to be sustainable. They always fail in one way or another. This is always happening, particularly if you look at any kind of authoritarian states. They tend to keep at sometimes even decades, but ultimately they crash down. And why this is happening? I believe this is happening because at some point in time they lost the trust of the people. They can still continue, but now the situation is that they are leading by the fear. And that can go on, but in our world, where people generally are quite well informed, that cannot go for too long. There comes a heavy resistance. At some point of time, there is no future for that. That builds the very idea of this type of the buildings. They are here because they are in a way a representation of and a symbol of something truly important for us people, which is that we want to be a part of our system. We want to contribute and have our impact to the system, to the society in which we are a part of. And even if we don't have a big impact, we need to have an impact. And we cannot be left to think that we are actually not there to be a part of this decision-making body, but it's somebody out there. And that is because our value systems are changing all around the world, that we recognize these type of values to be top important where the democracy prevails. There are many different kinds of democracies in the world, and some of them are not real democracies, very hollow democracies. But it's very important to keep in mind that nobody can really offer a sustainable solution or alternative to the democratic system that allows people to have their voices, have an equitable and fair and collaborative economy, have equality among the people in a real way, so that there is not such a harsh distinction to the A and B class as in a traditional societies often had. That's the future. Subscribe to my channel and please give me your opinion about what you think is the future of democracy, or if you think that there is an alternative to democracy.